everyone, to another DeFi Raiders AMA. I'm Degenic here with Slava from Entangle Finance, or is it Entangle Fi? Um, well, it's one or the other, and we'll find out that and more in just a minute. To get us started, Slava, if you'd please introduce us, tell us a little bit about how you got into DeFi. We'll take it from there.
Yes, pleasure. I guess it's really Entangled Protocol, just because there's some certain connotations, I guess, with finance. Everyone's finance nowadays, but it's more of a thing that we're not just doing finance, but we're also building an Oracle solution, and I guess that's why protocol is a better word. I think because finance does not encapsulate everything. But about me, I'm Slava. I'm from Denmark, or as you might have guessed it, maybe not so much, as I have a Russian name. My parents are Russian, but I'm born in Denmark, and I originally come from a computer science perspective, having done my degree in east side of Germany in Chemnitz. I think that's a long while now since I did that. I think 9 years ago or 10 years ago. I don't even remember. Um, I've my experience in DeFi has been a lot from a research perspective. I got into the blockchain industry, I think, back in 2016, 17, mainly from a research perspective. I was very interested in the different infrastructure solutions, and specifically about Oracle solutions, and I thought that's a very complex problem that needs to be solved. I was originally very inspired by Sergei Nazarov, the great philosopher in Chainlink version 1 white paper, how he conceptualized a whole Oracle solution as a philosophical concept rather than a very technical one. And that really inspired me to go deeper inside the rabbit hole. And I think I pretty much read every big white paper there was before 2020, before it really exploded, and we had a lot of these new protocols coming up. Then it's really hard to keep track. Also, I'm an avid yield farmer, mostly a very exotic one. Um, Anyways, back when Phantom was exotic, 2020, 2019. Um, and also yield from a lot in Tezos back in the day when it was very profitable. I mean, 1% per day. Those were good days and plenty DeFi and Tezos. I'm not sure if you had the chance to do that back in the day. Um, and with Tezos specifically, I encountered a lot of problems just because it was a very centralized solution back when they need to bridge stuff back and forth between EVM blockchains and Tezos, and just the whole thing. It was very non-interoperable, very complicated for the sake of being complicated, and not very user-friendly. And there's still a lot of problems there, and I guess that's really why Tezos never really did take off, even if they have an amazing blockchain solution, which is allegedly going to be the future for banks adopting it. But who knows what it's going to come into. Um, so my brother has known Faisal for over 3 years. He saw I was doing all this stuff with DeFi, and he was like, "You guys should meet." And that's when we did. I think sometime like 1.5 years ago, and we saw a lot of synergies. And that's pretty much when our golden child, Entangle protocol, was born.
Very cool. Great story. Thank you. So before we get into exactly what Entangle is and does, would you tell us just a little more about the team and how you all came together?
Oh yes. So a lot of the team is because Faisal is from is also a lawyer and has worked in RegTech and delivered global. Excuse my cough. Regulatory support.
I'm
He has
afraid
a
you're robot voicing.
robot voice. Uh, what do you mean? Sorry.
Meaning you're breaking up quite badly. I'm unable to make out the last couple of things you said, unfortunately.
Oh, I see. I see. Yes. So Faisal, our CEO, is from a regulatory perspective. He's a lawyer that's worked in multiple banks, delivering global fintech programs and solutions. And he's also done the Oxford blockchain program. I believe it was Oxford. But please excuse me if I'm citing some things wrong. Where he met a lot of founders and developers, and that's initially how we seeded our team. Um, so on our team, we have, of course, our project manager and Tristan, which is our new CMO, and me as the CIO leading innovation. And then we have, I believe, backend developers, so backend block, and two front end developers and one designer. Well, I think definitely the star of our team on the backend side is Alexei Kokinos, which also works on blockchain as program manager, and he has a lot of inspirations from there, which has really helped drive up Entangle to what it is today and how we deal with our solution and everything that we conceptualize is towards building a solution to resolve liquidity cross chain.
Very cool. So yeah, there's our segue. So you're building, as I understand it from reading the docs, a liquidity-centric sublayer that will enable cross-chain liquidity provisioning spanning both EVM and non-EVM chains.
Exactly. But what does that exactly mean? That's the great question, I guess, of today. Um, Initially, we started with the problem statement, really, that liquidity is very fragmented, intra-chain and cross-chain. So liquidity in DeFi is very limited, right? Anyways, compared to traditional finance world, and this results in a lot of slippage and a lot of inconsistencies and a lot of troubles, both for the user and protocol perspective, and also it carries a lot of mercenary capital, which is going in and out to yield farm from mass API, and then once they realize that there's no more mass APR or API, then they go on to the next protocol. So you'll farm that and dump the tokens, and that's not really sustainable, is that? And then really it's about the fact that protocols, intra-chain and cross-chain, can't really recycle each other's liquidity. Just to give you a perspective, let's imagine you are a liquidity provider on Trader Joe on AVAX. You provide, for example, USDT and Bitcoin, or USDT and AVAX. Let's just keep it AVAX centric for the sake of it. And you get an LP token in return, right? Usually, as a user, you just take the LP token on Trader Joe, and that's really where the story ends, right? There's not really much more to it. But what if you, as a user, you could recycle that liquidity? What if you could repurpose that liquidity, which we have provided on Trader Joe, to derivatives protocols or lending and borrowing protocols? Essentially, if you could repurpose that to lending and borrowing protocols, intrachain and cross-chain, then that really opens up for leverage yield farming. Or I think the most interesting aspect is really to recycle it to derivatives protocols like perpetuals or options, as they often lack in abilities to obtain liquidity, as most of the liquidity is locked on dexes. So this is really the problem that Entangle is targeting, how we solve that liquidity problem, that liquidity can be recycled everywhere, intrachain and cross-chain. To give you specific examples of intrachain, as you have an LP token on AVAX, you can give it to Entangle. Entangle auto compounds the LP token and farms it on Trader Joe. And based on the amount of LP tokens you provided to Entangle, we issue you LSD of LP tokens, which is called a synthetic vault. Now you have the synthetic vault being fully collateralized by LP tokens on AVAX. Now you can either, for example, provided on a lending and borrowing protocol in AVAX, for example, Aave, to further maximize your capital efficiency. Or you can say, for example, no, I want to bridge this LP tokens, synthetic vault, sorry, to Arbitrum because there's a lot of new perps protocols there, options protocols there, which are very exciting. I want to provide it there to GMX to gain further yield so I can earn and earn at the same time while helping another protocol there. So that's really what we're doing in a nutshell, recycling liquidity, repurposing it everywhere. And to do this, we build our own infrastructure, which is our Oracle solution, which is hosted on our blockchain, Entangle blockchain, which is built using the Cosmos SDK. And I can go a lot more into that if you have any questions just to describe the Oracle and the blockchain, how that all works. But I don't want to bore you too much in that matter.
Now, I'd love to go into detail about oracles and about your understanding of the problem space, right? I get, from reading your docs that Chainlink is a significant bottleneck in DeFi. So I'd love to know, in more detail from you why that's the case, and how about, the rest of the oracle space. I know there are a handful of other established oracles. Some are even open source. So what led you to, finding the current space insufficient and needing and wanting to build your own?
A great question. So back when we started building Entangle 1.5 years ago, I would I would I would say it's safe to assume that it was a very premature space for a lot of Oracle solutions. I guess Chainlink was at the very forefront at any of them, but we really wanted a solution that was completely flexible and allowed us to build whatever we wanted with no limitations, and really also from a cost perspective that we're not going to lose runway or significant parts of runway because we need to use an Oracle solution, right? And this is really what triggered us to do this whole research phase where we research, for example, a Chainlink Axelar. Can we use these, or is it really just better to build our own? And this is really where we decided to build our own. And not to say that Chainlink or Axelar are bad. No, they're not. They're definitely great products, no doubt about it, or even Layer Zero. It's more of a perspective, I think, that they're going from a real B2B perspective, one size fits all, which wasn't really applicable to Entangle. And I can go a little bit more into that because really we are doing very complex logic to execute transactions on 8 chains. And sometimes we need to, for example, execute transactions on 4 chains at the same time while they're all affected by something that is happening in all other 8 chains. And this is not really something you can exactly do on Chainlink or Layer Zero, as for example, Layer Zero is more a perfect solution for pairwise bridging between 2 chains or messaging protocol, but it's not really fit to do complex cross-chain transactions and logic between many chains, such as in our circumstances with 8 blockchains. And this is where we devised a solution. We needed like a whiteboard to fulfill every single need which we have, which is mainly one thing. Um, we needed some place on chain where we could store information, where it was very gas efficient and cheap, so it wouldn't incur big costs. And then now that we have all this information, now we can process it and do on-chain computation, and again from a very cost-efficient perspective. And then we can execute it on multiple blockchains at once as a verified transaction. Those are really the three things that we were looking at when we were building our Oracle solution and why we build it. And how it really works is we have Entangle blockchain. On Entangle blockchain, we have a spotter smart contract, which is essentially a contract which runs and stores information coming in and processes it and look for validation between multiple keepers, which we use to download information from either off-chain endpoints or on-chain endpoints through RPC. And then really we store that information, process it, do on-chain computation logic, see if we need to execute events on other chains, validate that, and if we need to execute information on other chains. Now we have a set of keepers, which then deliver that to the end destination, to another blockchain in an aggregator spot smart contract or Entangle endpoint, or we haven't really decided on how we're going to brand it yet, as we're still just in the building phase. I guess something like quantum endpoint. And so we have a multiple of keepers delivering that to an Entangle endpoint and another blockchain, which we then compare the information that actually a majority of the keepers agree that this is true, and then we execute it on another blockchain. I think this is the Oracle solution in a nutshell. I'm very open to if you have any specific questions, how some things might work.
Yeah, thanks for that. So I'm curious, what's the right frame of reference for this? I saw, that you referenced in the docs both Seller and synthetics. I can identify elements of both, but I'm curious what kind of how for those of us that are more familiar with these established protocols, right? How should we think of this in relation to those?
I think that the closest competitor or that is established that we might think is Axelar, which is an external verified messaging protocol. In external verified, I mean that information is verified on another blockchain, which is what Axelar is doing. And they're essentially doing a lot of the same things that we are, really. And they're an amazing team, amazing tech stack. I really adore them, actually. But it was not just very practical for us in order to use them. I'm not sure if you're aware that they're essentially non-EVM. You can't really write your own logic and contracts on top of a blockchain. And even if you hypothetically could, I guess they're going to allow that in the future. It's not in Solidity, but in Go language, as they're Cosmos SDK based chains. And that poses a lot of troubles, in our opinion, from the developers, because all these other languages, yes, I mean, they're great, and each of them carry their own perspectives and possibilities. But really, if you want to mass product, make a mass product, is really about creating the simplest product, which is full of flexibility and which most developers can integrate and build upon it. And we all know that Solidity is the language that every backend developer knows. It's very, very, very hard actually to find a developer which is proficient in Go or Rust or any other exotic language, and even harder to find one which is proficient in all three. But this is where we are lucky in our team. We have Alexei Kokinos from that worked from Tom Blockchain. He is he's one smart dude.
Yeah, that's great. That's really interesting. So I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought there for a minute. So I'm thinking about now. Yes, so you guys also are built on are built to support the Cosmos ecosystem, right? So you can operate as a bridge between EVM and at least Cosmos non-EVM chains.
Yes,
or a link, I suppose, not a bridge. Sorry.
Well, I guess bridge or messaging protocol or whatever one might want to frame it. I guess we will go with the term Oracle solution. We are an Oracle solution that can integrate any chain, whatever it is, really. With Cosmos-based chains, we will use the IBC module, which is something that we're deeply working on right now to get live. But with every other chain, EVM or non-EVM, we can integrate easily. It's really just about connecting the RPC endpoints of the chains and building an aggregator spot a smart contract on each of those chains and really make it interoperable. So to date, we have 7 EVM blockchains currently connected to the Oracle solution, and right now we're rolling out the first non-EVM iteration for it, which is Multiverse X, formerly known as Elrond, which we're integrating into that.
Oh, very cool. So would you? So I know one of the great potential applications of this is for a new chain to be able to fairly instantly provision liquidity. So would you talk about what that would look like for first protocol that launches on new chain?
I'm not exactly sure I got your question, but yeah. So I definitely think that newer chains, they often lack in possibilities to attract CVL unless they do a mass airdrop campaign. As we see nowadays, we had Optimism, then Arbitrum, and now we have CK Sync and all this new roll-ups coming up. And really, they're attracting liquidity on the basis on that users are going to get an airdrop, right? And if they didn't have it, I mean, who knows really how much liquidity they would attract. But one thing is easy to say, it's very hard to attract real underlying liquidity. But what if you could attract liquidity which is a representation of liquidity somewhere else? And this is really where synthetic vaults come in, our main app, and the possibilities of these, that you can lock liquidity on, for example, Uniswap on Ethereum and get a synthetic vault as a receipt for that. And now, if a chain integrates the Entangle Oracle solution, we can now bridge the synthetic vault to this new chain, and now a protocol on this new chain can use that liquidity for a multitude of purposes. For example, lending and borrowing protocol, or perps or options protocol. And this is a much easier way for them to attract liquidity than to require users to take their liquidity in ETH and simply bridge it over, where users might not be too much comfortable in doing that.
Yeah, this is right, potentially revolutionary for liquidity provisioning and changing the incentive, the mercenary liquidity structure that currently exists across DeFi.
Yeah, I also think it's like when we like just go a step back. I mean, to the traditional world, right? The TradFi, you have so many different instruments, bonds, whatnot, within the ecosystem, and these are all intertradable everywhere. This is a very complex, interoperable system, which is what makes our world work today or not work. As we can see, banks defaulting left and right nowadays. But this is really our core ethos. Like we're gonna bring this complexity and the interoperability of TradFi to DeFi. And this is really what synthetic vaults does, that liquidity can be tapped from every single chain and interoperable. Everyone can interact with it. It's efficient. It's not just siloed on one chain where it's dead, or and it's just there until there's no more mass APRs, and then it leads to another chain. We got to make sure that liquidity is sticky and can be efficient and recycled everywhere.
Yeah, makes sense. So speaking of TradFi, TradFi, of course, we know operates with collateralization ratios, under 10% for the most part these days, often well under 10%, and trade in trading volume in derivatives is measured in the quadrillions. Do you think that DeFi should even try to emulate this, or is there a line that should be drawn somewhere in the creation of infinite layers of derivatives on top of each other?
I do think that's a great question, and I will probably say I'm maybe not the most qualified person to answer that question, as we do have people in governments deciding really how complex TradFi should be. Just from a theoretical perspective, right? All these are different derivatives products. But I do think that we do gotta bring all this to DeFi, and essentially the only line that can be drawn is really from a regulatory perspective. Like, and I think at the end of the day, the core mission of DeFi is really to emulate the real world. And do think that this year I see a lot of new projects starting up, and they're mirroring essentially TradFi, or trying to achieve that given the new regulatory landscape, to mirror that in the DeFi. And that's really where I think the world is going, to a trustless system where everything is also transparent. And I also do think that eventually, maybe it's not this year, maybe it's not next year, maybe it's in 5 years or in 10 years. This is really where the world is going to go, because full on-chain transparency is needed for everything. We are seeing that today with Deutsche Bank or Silvergate, for example, that yes, maybe the interest rates did have a large effect on them defaulting, but essentially they were not being responsible towards the customers. And the only way for them to be responsible towards the customers were if they were fully transparent. And this is what blockchain solves. It's always fully transparent. Everything is public. So in that way, I do not think there should be any borders. I think that everything needs to go on chain in order to show full respect to the end user and end customer.
Yeah, great answer. And yeah, right. Until the mythical future where we have uncorruptible regulators.
Exactly,
Uh,
exactly. I also do have a theory that all these things happening in the banking world, I'm not from a banking perspective, excuse my ignorance, is really because they created this layers upon layers upon layers, which essentially lost meaning in itself in the end. And there were obvious ways to gamify that, which some people did. And this is really what made what is making the system go into a recession currently, or however one wants to want to frame the current economic situation. It does certainly show signs of recession.
yeah, no, makes sense. And right, I would like to trace that back to simply the increase in revenue that's been extracted out of the global economy from financial services over the years. But in any event, that's off topic. So so returning to the task at hand, why don't we talk a little bit about testnet and security before we move on then to governance, tokenomics, and fundraising. So I
Sure thing.
understand. Oh, I'm sorry. I understand y'all have been on testnet for a while, and there were some early issues, as we might expect from from a project this ambitious. So would you just tell us about your experience with testing and testers so far?
So it's been a great experience, both from a product perspective, community perspective, and also from a build perspective. So what we did is, initially for our testnet, was that we saw that there was all these established testnets, but it wasn't really very flexible for us to build on top of those, because not every protocol is on those established testnets like Repstain. So we were like, okay, we need to go the hard way. So what we did instead, we forked every mainnet completely, and we launched our own versions of the testnet. And what we did for those testnets were that we took synthetic vaults, but and we minted USDC, or we obtained USDC. And what we did then is that we obtained LP tokens with that USDC of various stable coin LPs, for example, USDT/USDC. And now, based on those LP tokens, we locked them and issued synthetic vaults, which we then made available for trading for users, which were all airdropped, I think, 100 USDC each. And now they can trade these synthetic vaults back and forth across multiple chains. So, for example, on AVAX, an end user can trade a synthetic vault, which is based on liquidity on Aave or Uniswap, or a user in Phantom can trade synthetic vaults representing liquidity based on AVAX, for example. And within all those DEXs, we also are testing an innovative concept, which is liquidity rebalancing, which is how to minimize bridging, but that is another complex thing in itself, which is really in the test beds. But an amazing innovation our developers have come out of. So for the testnet, we have integrated 8 chains, which is Ethereum, Binance Smart Chain, AVAX, Phantom, Arbitrum, Optimism, Polygon, and then later we're going to launch Multiverse X. So that's been going on since the end of January, so for almost 2 months now. And I think in 2 months' time, we're going to launch the second iteration of our testnet. This is where we're going to take all the things we've built and not just have it in a centralized script, but actually put it on top of our Oracle solution, which is validated on Entangle blockchain. And then we're going to give users LP tokens. And now users can collateralize LP tokens and get a synthetic vault as a receipt and then use it for secondary purposes. But we're not just launching it from a user perspective. We're also launching the testnet for protocols so they can come in and try to use the Entangle Oracle solution and see the benefits and flexibility that it can give.
Oh, very cool. And that should give you an opportunity to really poke at the security, since of course you've picked the two spaces that I think involve most of the big money exploits in DeFi, right? Bridging and oracles. So what approach are you taking to ensure that the chain is safe from proof exploits, the oracles are safe from manipulation?
Great question. So we are built using the Cosmos SDK and using Ethermint and the Tendermint consensus algorithm. And that's a proven algorithm which, to my knowledge, has never ever been exploited or hacked. And this is what we rely on. But of course, that is not just enough. From a validator node perspective, you got to make sure that these are decentralized enough and you have enough validators, and that no validators run more than a certain percentage of the node network, right? So this is where first things first, we do KYC on our validators who run the validator nodes. And 2, we make sure that these are decentralized, like they're not just all using Amazon Web Services based in Frankfurt, because if that goes down, then the whole network goes down. We have to make it properly decentralized across the whole globe. And thirdly, if we're aiming actually to have a minimum of 30 validator nodes at launch. We're going to make sure that no single entity runs more than 1 or 2 validators, just to make sure that there's no compromise of security. That's about security from a validator node perspective. But there's also security risks concerning oracles in itself. And this is, for example, whenever keepers deliver information to Entangle blockchain, we make sure to source information from a variety of sources, independent and trustworthy sources, for example, about the prices of LP tokens or assets and whatnot. And then we compare the consensus of the different keepers, and we'll make sure to run as many keepers as possible really there, because the more keepers, the merrier, the higher security you have really. And because Entangle blockchain is specifically only built to validate Oracle's transactions, we're not trying to compete with Ethereum or any other established blockchain. We're really just making it to validate and store Oracle transactions. And the second security perspective is also whenever we aggregate information to an endpoint on another blockchain, this is also where we gotta make sure that we don't just use one keeper, which other solutions rely on. I even though they're doing threshold signatures, but often that's the problem, that they're just relying on one centralized keeper because that's the cheapest option. In fact, we're building the Entangle Oracle solution as such that any developer can use whatever keeper method, flexibility, like maybe they just want one keeper or maybe 100 keepers. We don't care. We provide anything that any developer wants. And ultimately, everyone understands that the more keeper, the more expensive it is, but it's also more decentralized. But not every information, again, is of equal importance and is of equal sensitivity. But just on that note, is just to give you a concrete security example, whenever keepers deliver information to an endpoint, such as, for example, an AVAX to an aggregator spot a smart contract, which holds the keys to execute and automate processes, keepers must first deposit Entangle tokens of a certain US dollar value as a kind of security deposit. So imagine you have 10 keepers delivering information to AVAX endpoint, Entangle endpoint. They each have to deposit $10,000 worth of Entangle tokens into the aggregator spotter smart contract. And then the aggregator spotter smart contract is going to confirm the validity of the message. And 80% of the keepers have to agree. And if one of them is not in agreement with the other 80%, then we're going to slash his or her tokens, or the keeper's tokens, as they were lying. And this is another security mechanism that we're imbuing. So we have double validation on the Entangle blockchain and on the external blockchains where keepers are economically incentivized also to provide the truth rather than just from an altruistic perspective.
Very cool. So yeah, you guys are covering all the angles. And is there or will there be a bug bounty program as well?
Yes. First things first, we are just going to go through audits as soon as we actually launch our Oracle solution testnet, and I think it's in 2 months due. Or actually we're starting earlier just for private testers. Time. We're gonna go through some audits with some companies which we're currently in talks with, and after those audits, we are gonna plan to launch a bug bounty program, of course, because it's of imperative importance, because you do need white hat hackers to come in and really try to abuse the system, because that's really the only way to find the flaws. Because, as we all know, there's a lot of reputable audit companies, right? But even them, they often don't do a full audit. They just look at from a very what's it called? They're just doing it from their own perspective, but they can't really see every single security point of view, as maybe they may or may not have the time. And that's also why, I mean, we see big protocols often getting hacked or have security issues. I think today, what was that protocol? Rune, Thorchain. I mean, they have been audited by many reputable companies, right? And even they face security issues because the audit companies are just not able to catch everything. And this is where I think the importance lies in white hat hackers, that they could come in, they're economically incentivized as well to come in and really try to find flaws and bugs in the system, which can be security exploits, get rewarded for doing so, and also help the end protocol.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. So then the last kind of component of security is really governance. Then, which you talked about a little bit. But so Entangle will be a DAO. Voting will be based on both staked Entangle tokens and also Entangle USD.
Actually, because of the regulatory current landscape, we have decided to remove Entangle USD for now. We have it fully built, but we may or may not include it in the actual build. But for now, we have just put a big pause on that, as we want to make sure we're fully regulatory compliant. And also just because we used USDC as the base, to peg Entangle USD, and there was the whole USDC debacle, and this is why it's paused for now. So the DAO itself, we have also paused it as we did not really see the need of such, anyways, for the beginning, and we may or may not include it. It's already pretty much built, and we may include it build stage, but we just really want to be completely focused on our core products, which is synthetic vaults, built using the Oracle solution. I think, I mean, they often.
I'm sorry, Slava, you're breaking up a little bit again.
Oh, okay. I think a lot of protocols are being DAOs, right? And it's not necessarily a great word nowadays, but they're just being a DAO for the sake of being a DAO. But what's the real utility? Because often, if a protocol has a DAO, it's really the minority of people that vote in a DAO. Is it really governance then? What implication does it have? Really? And it's not really beneficial, and it doesn't really reflect the user base. Maybe it reflects a minority of the user base, which is very interested in the protocol. But those are the considerations we have made why we have decided to also put the pause on Entangle down now. Anyways, build, we can put it in at a much later stage if we need to, but we're just going to be purely product focused on synthetic tools and Entangle Oracle solution upon the Entangle.
Yeah, that makes a lot of
I hope
sense
that
to me.
answers
I mean,
the question.
certainly I see. Yeah, no, absolutely it does. I see governance, decentralized governance as an unsolved problem and one that requires a good bit of focus and innovation to do successfully. So yeah, it makes sense to not focus on it. So now let's talk about tokenomics and revenue, and move into your fundraise. So this will be a real yield protocol, as everyone likes to say right now, with revenue coming from auto compounding fees from the LP tokens, from trading fees, from swaps between USDC and synthetic vaults, interest and liquidation fees, and gas fees and Oracle fees. Is that correct?
Old version of our documentation as is currently just being updated. But yes, that is correct, which is synthetic vault performance fees and liquidity reserve fees whenever they are used for secondary protocol. Internal DEX trading.
Yeah.
Oh, I apologize for that. I just went outside to have a connection. It's a nightmare in Indiana. As I was
Yeah, no
saying,
problem at all. Welcome back.
thank you. As I was saying, we derive revenue from multiple sources, which is, as you mentioned, internal DEX trading fees between USDC and synthetic vaults, and then synthetic vault performance fees, and then liquidity recycling fees when secondary synthetic vaults are used for secondary protocols. And then we also have gas fees and Oracle premium fees. And all emissions that we give out to either stakers or keepers or liquidity providers for the internal DEXs, these are all real revenue backed or real yield, as it's said. We never give out more emissions that we are fully backed by. And what we do really, whenever we get revenue in USDC, we buy entangled tokens off from the market, and we distribute it towards liquidity providers, keepers, stakers, delegators, and validators, and a small portion is locked for 12 months for further marketing and development, so the project has a real runway and can achieve sustainability.
Yeah, very cool. Makes sense. And how is the dev team paid?
So the dev team is paid. Obviously, there's a number of team tokens, and obviously, this is also why we are going on a race currently for seed round, and in order to have a runway for at least 2 years.
Oh, excellent. That would be a great runway to have. So now tell us about the raise. How has that gone? Is it ongoing? And if so, how can people participate in it?
The race has been going very great. Initially, we started racing perhaps at the worst time possible during the time when FTX collapsed. And when all that stuff went on, we were like, okay, this is a bad time to do so. So we really just paused the race completely. But initially, we got a lot of interest, but we didn't want to go on and knock too many doors. So then we started racing again, I believe, in February or a little bit before that, perhaps. And that's been going very well, actually, very smooth. We are getting a lot of interest, and we're speaking to a lot of great VCs. So we are raising at 15 million fully diluted valuation for seed round. And currently, I would say we've raised about $1.3 million. We still have, I guess, 700K left in that. But we've also started raising private round as well. And we have shifted some of the seed into the private round because we are realizing more and more it's not about money really when you're raising. It's more about having real good partners. It's easy to raise money, but it's not easy to raise money from good partners, which is actually going to help you. For example, with development, market makers, listing, or a community, actually fostering a great user base, or even liquidity providers. And this is why we are very, very picky who is in a seed round. What benefits can they actually bring? Are they just mercenary capital, which is going to dump on us? Then we do not want them at all. Every single partner in a seed round needs to bring some value, which is very substantial.
Now, that's a great approach. That's one that we rarely or perhaps never hear in DeFi.
Mm. Yes, yes, and that's also why I think a lot of protocols eventually, I mean, they have 1 year runway, and then, I mean, that doesn't really happen much more after that because they were just raising money, but they didn't really find good partners that was actually helping them. I mean, they just invested in seed round, they did a 5x, and they just dumped on them, and then goodbye, we're on to the next. And this is not really sustainable, right? And this is also our core ethos of everything that we're doing in Entangle. We're trying to make sure it really comes from a TradFi perspective in many ways, that everything is fully sustainable, even when emissions, but also just how we run the whole operation. It's for the long term. It's not just for a year and then goodbye.
Yeah, very cool. No, it's wonderful to see talk to a project with such a great long-term vision. So speaking of now, I think our my last topic before we open it up to questions is what's on the roadmap. I know planning the V2 testnet in a couple months, but then what is there? Can you tell us anything else about the future?
Yes, just to give you a short summary. So we are planning the V2 testnet in 2 months, and then we're gonna do a mass, or we're actually starting a mass BD campaign to really integrate secondary protocols and to use synthetic vols for the V2 testnet. And then we're also planning a large Oracle integrations. Excuse me, to allow really protocols to test and and use Entangle Oracle solution. So we're already derive revenue before we even go TGE and mainnet. So right now we're slating mainnet for the end of Q3, I believe around August or September. And really we are planning to have everything built really before that, what we have of synthetic vaults and Oracle solution. Of course, there's always room for improvement, and later down the line, we are looking towards expanding the Oracle solutions to include even more exotic possibilities, and also maybe repurposing, or not repurposing, but building on top of the Tendermint consensus, and um, really fine tuning some things which maybe make it even better for us, a more efficient blockchain, which with even a smaller block time. But really, in the long run, I do see ourselves as, now that we have this pool of liquidity, which is synthetic vaults, now we need to really solve liquidity. And this is where we are planning to, after mainnet TGE, to launch cross-chain lending and borrowing dApps such as RDNT, for example, but with synthetic vaults as a base. And later down the line, we are also looking at building an options dApp based on this, but this is still in the early research phases as of right now, so I can't comment much more on that as of such.
Oh, very cool. So yeah, hopefully we'll see a whole ecosystem develop on top of Entangle, similar to what we have with synthetics.
Exactly.
Yeah, very cool. I'm excited to see it. Well, good. Now, do you, Slava, do you have any closing remarks before I open it up to questions? And audience, if anybody has any questions, please tweet them at us, chat them at me in our Discord, or raise your hand and I'll let you up on stage.
Well, my only closing remarks is it's been a pleasure to be here, and I thank you for this AMA, and I'm really looking forward to any questions.
Yeah, our pleasure as well. Thanks for joining. Anyone? Questions? Going twice? Well, sold, I think. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. Thanks, Slava, for your time and for such great detail. And it's been a pleasure learning about Entangle protocol. We're excited to see the next version of the testnet, and boy, for revolutionizing liquidity sometime later this year. This has been a DeFi Raiders AMA. I'm DeGenic. Thanks very much.
Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Yeah, really a pleasure, Slava. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day.